Hello, witchy nibblings. Auntie Lorelei here. Um, in kind of a different setup that I'm normally in. I'm at a hotel right now. We're doing a little close to home staycation for my husband's birthday. So I don't have my normal setup. I do have notes. I'm going to be looking down a little bit to look at those. I apologize. Um, but if things just look sort of different, that's why I'm not in my normal space. But it's so good to see you. I am here today to talk to you about the sometimes like perplexing or strange things that our tutelary spirits or familiar spirits might ask from us. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the concept of a gesh, which I'll explain in just a minute. So we've talked here on the channel before about the compacts or deals that we make with spirits. Those compacts might be short or long-term agreements, or contracts that sort of lay out a tit for tat relationship or exchange that's going to be happening. Its purposes are the same as any kind of contract that you would make with another human. They ensure that there's a level of reciprocity that's being had. They define the specifics of the agreement. They offer a level of protection for both parties that are involved. And they define a path of potential recourse if somebody does not fulfill their obligations along the lines of the agreement. So if somebody fails to deliver or deliberately violates the agreement, there's usually something that's written in about what the consequences of that might be. Today, though, what I want to talk with you about is a different type of promise making that can be asked of us by our spirits. And that type of promise making that I want to talk about comes to us in the form of a gesh. That is spelled Geis. And it is an old Irish word that refers to a taboo or a prohibition that's actually placed upon a person. So it's an idiosyncratic kind of restriction or taboo. Sometimes it's not a taboo against doing something, but more of a taboo that if certain circumstances exist, you must do something. So we see, and it's idiosyncratic in the sense that it's only going to apply to that one individual. It's not something that's being required by everybody that's in contact with that particular spirit necessarily. It's just sort of a special arrangement between you and them. So in Celtic myth and legend, for example, we see this pop up again and again and again, like it happens a lot across the Celtic world. So we can see examples in from like European Celtic tribes. We see it in the British Isles, in those Celtic spaces, and like within individual cultures. So the Irish have several examples, the Welsh have several examples, and I'm going to be sharing. The Scots have their own examples, right? So I'm going to be sharing a couple here that are specific to Celtic and Irish myth and folklore that you might be familiar with, and you just might not have thought of them in terms of this gesh that I'm presenting to you. So the Irish hero Cuchulainn was given a gesh that he must never eat the meat of a dog or hound. That's not actually how he got his name. He got his name from killing a particularly fearsome dog. But because Cu means dog, if you didn't know. So he's the Hound of Culainn himself. And that name is more based on this story that involves a particular dog that he was associated with, as opposed to this gesh that was laid on him. So there's a lot of his myth that kind of touches back to this sort of dog or hound energy. But anyway, I digress. The Welsh princess Arianrhod pronounces a threefold gesh upon her son, who is later named She, or Lou, if you're American like me. That's Lleu. And the gesh that she puts upon him, again, is threefold, so that he would never receive a name, weapons, or a human wife. And all of those three things were the mother's right to grant. permission to marry, the name was given by the mother, and your first weapons, for instance, were given by your mother at that time period in that cultural context. Those were all within her power to give, and she said, I will not be giving any of those things. And there were reasons for that that are actually attached to her uncle and her own brother, because her uncle was King Math, Ap Mathonwy, and he was under a gesh, that dictated that he always had his feet resting in the lap of a virgin anytime that he was seated. Yeah, I'm dubious about that one too. But moving on, contemporarily, I've known of folks in this day and age who have been given a gesh. They've been given similar types of taboos or restrictions or requirements. Sometimes it's an action that they must never fail to perform if the circumstances are present to do that action. Sometimes it's something that they have to refrain from doing. Sometimes in certain circumstances, or sometimes it's just you must never do this again. Sometimes that gesh is only for a very short and defined period of time, but it can also last a lifetime, right? It can be with you for the rest of your life, depending on the spirit that's asking it of you, why they're asking it, what they're asking, etc. In the folklore, figures don't typically have a choice when it comes to accepting the gesh. It's laid upon them, usually by somebody that has authority over them, whether that's another human type figure or human appearing figure, or it might be a spirit of some type. It might be a spirit that's called a god or goddess, right? So, but they don't really have a choice. The choice that they get to make is whether or not they're going to abide by this restriction, by this gesh, or if they're not going to. Usually, if they do, there are some blessings that are associated with it. And if they don't, very often there's consequences, which could certainly be interpreted as a curse, right? Depending on, again, how all that plays out and what the consequences look like. So for those who faithfully honor their gesh, it's a blessing. These blessings often come in the form of strength or luck or power of some kind, a special ability, an uncanniness, just sort of like living that charmed life, having everything sort of go your way. Often happens that we see in the folklore. Sometimes the person's not told in the beginning about a blessing that may come. They just start experiencing it and going, I think it's from this. I think this is because of that. So a lot of times they only discover that they have this blessing based on this gesh after some time has passed. Or in more unfortunate cases, they might discover that they had a blessing that was based on this, but they only recognize it when it's been stripped from them because they have now violated the gesh. So the blessing goes away. And if you go from living this really charmed life to suddenly you have very average seeming luck, that's going to seem like you now have bad luck or that you've been, punished or cursed in some way because now things are not always coming up roses for you. And you have to work a little harder than you're used to doing just to make things sort of average and smooth. In the present day, I've witnessed and experienced a gesh as a choice. It's not usually something that's just told to you that you must accept and do. So a spirit who may or may not be a deity essentially asks or suggests that a person agree to some kind of special restriction or requirement, and the person agrees to it for any number of personal reasons. And we'll talk about a few of those. I'm going to bring this up just a little bit higher so I'm not looking straight down. So a scenario that I've seen a lot in recent years has to do with certain goddesses asking for a priestess to do something specific to their hair, for example, shave it all off and keep it shaved, or never cut it again, is another one that I've seen. Always wear it bound so that it's in a braid, in a ponytail, in a bun, so that it's tied up in some way, or possibly never, ever wear it bound again. Don't put anything in your hair that would limit its movement. I have a good friend that was a gesh that she was under for a good period of time in association with a goddess that she was attached to. I've seen a whole lot of priestesses being called to wear a headscarf or to veil their hair in some way. That might be a partial veiling or it might be a complete veiling, but that's one that I've seen more and more. And that's become an expression of sort of faith and devotion and commitment that I'm seeing a lot more within goddess work, within the goddess community. And it's interesting. I want to dive into that, but that's a whole other topic. So maybe we'll circle back to it at some point. I've known of people that were requested or instructed to dye their hair a specific color, and that goes back millennia. There were priestesses and priests of certain sects in the ancient world that dyed their hair sort of outlandish and unnatural colors to mark them as being devoted to or in service of a deity. For those priestesses that I'm talking about today that I know personally, it's a sign of their commitment to their goddesses for why they say yes to this. It's been sort of put in their consciousness, brought to their attention. It's a thought that they can't get rid of, that the goddess would want them to do this. And so as a mark of their own service to that goddess, they do that. It's something that they choose for themselves. And very often they find that their relationship with that goddess is strengthened as a result of it. They feel closer connection. They feel like they're being very purposeful when they, for instance, put on their headscarf before they go out into the world. That donning of that piece of apparel is a marker for them of that special relationship that they have, that other people might not even recognize that that's what that marker stands for them, but they know when they put it on that that's what it means. So in April of 2024, I was given a gesh. And it feels a little bit vulnerable to talk about. But I've checked and I am at full liberty to share. This is not something that the spirit who gave to me wants me to keep as a secret. And in fact, in some ways, I even feel encouraged to share about it, as I believe that spirit who laid this gesh upon me, who gave me the choice to accept this gesh, is hopeful that others might be inspired to make a similar commitment in honor and service to their own local water spirit or water spirits. Okay, big breath. I'm ready. So last year, on the final day of the Water Priestess Confluence, which is an event that I was a co-host of with Anwen Avalon, and that year I was also one of the keynote speakers. The most prominent water spirit in my life and in my landscape asked me to accept a gesh. So specifically, that was the Ohio River, asked me not to buy or receive new clothes. Ever. Like for the rest of my life. No new garments. And I have agreed. I asked a few questions before agreeing because I do feel really strongly that we are not just pawns in our own spiritual stories. We're not the playthings of deities and spirits. This is a mutual relationship. So I wanted to have questions answered before I said yes. So here are some of the questions that I asked and the answers that I got. Can I buy or make new undergarments, undies, bras, socks, stockings, those kinds of more personal and intimate types of apparel? Can I have those new? Or do I just have to sort of make do with what I've got for the rest of my life? And I was told that yes, that I can buy new of those things. Just the idea is to be conservative with how often I'm purchasing those things and to take care of them properly, mend them where appropriate, and to make them last for as long as possible. So I was very encouraged by that. Just for sanitation purposes, I wouldn't even know where to go about trying to find secondhand underwear. Like, no. Can I buy vintage and secondhand clothing? Yes. Hooray. That gives me, honestly, like lots of choices, and that opens the whole thing up to not feeling like it's a hardship of any kind. Can I accept gifts of clothing from people who don't know about the Gesh? No, I may not. And then my next question around those lines was, can I temporarily accept the gift of clothing out of politeness and then donate them to somebody else or to an organization? And the answer there was no as well, which is kind of a bummer. Just because I foresee some really awkward conversations happening in the future with family members who might give me a gift that is a piece of clothing and maybe potentially have their feelings hurt if they don't understand my commitment to this Gesh, right? But at that point, if they can't understand my promise and my commitment to this, then that becomes more of a them issue than a me issue. And I can take it from their hands as long as I'm telling them, like, I'm going to be donating this to somebody. My next question was, are there exceptions for special events like weddings? There is one in my future. I'm already married, folks, but my daughter, my eldest spawn, is getting married in 2025. And so we're in the hustle and bustle of wedding planning and, mother of the bride dresses, like, can I buy that new? And the answer is no, I may not. So that adds a layer of difficulty, but it's just planning. It's just prepping for it and seeing that it's coming and making arrangements around it. And I'm totally up for that. Another question that I had was, can I make or receive handmade clothing? And the answer that I got there was a little bit more nuanced. It was basically that if the item is made from vintage, upcycled, or repurposed textiles, then yes, I can. But if I have to go and buy new fabric at like a craft store or a fabric shop, then the answer is no, because that's still new textiles that were made in the current fashion garment industry that are doing terrible pollution things to the water, which we're going to talk about here in just a minute. So it does include, though, I can use fabric that's been part of my fabric stash, even though that was purchased new. Most of that fabric was purchased new, but like 5 years ago, and some of it's as old as like 30 years, because I've been sewing for a really long time. And if there are those of you that are watching this that are also into sewing, you know, as well as I know, that she who dyes with the most fabric wins, and I am a real competitor in that particular competition. Actually, I've stopped buying new fabric, obviously, and it's been about 5 years since I was sewing on any kind of regular basis. So I have fabric that I didn't want to part with because I still had a vision for what I wanted to do with it. I just haven't had the time, energy, or space in some cases to do that. And I can use that fabric still, which means I will be hoarding my fabric even more than in the past. And things like, I'm probably a lot less likely to just send sheets and other kinds of household linens off to Goodwill, for instance, when they've come to the end of their lifespan in the service of what they were doing. I'm much more likely now to repurpose and recycle those fabrics because I can't just go and buy new fabric. I can only use vintage and secondhand thrifted fabrics. So why thrift my own fabrics and then go and buy new ones? It wouldn't make sense. But at any rate, that's where that one is. And then one of the last questions that I personally asked or that I had was, can I buy a thrifted item? So something from a charity shop or a thrift store that still has the tags on. So it was manufactured it hasn't been purchased and worn by anybody. It still has, its manufacturer's tags on it to indicate that it's a new piece of clothing, but it's here in this secondhand space. And the answer is that yes, I may, but it should not be my first choice. I shouldn't be going out and seeking out new with tags on in a secondhand market. And I need to be conscientious about the choices around that. And one of my best friends had a question of her own that she wanted to know. This was after I'd already accepted the Gesh. She had asked, could I accept an item that, for instance, she bought for herself, but then didn't plan to keep for some reason, or decided that she wasn't going to keep? Maybe it was about the size or the texture or the way it fit, something like that. But my friend had that gleam in her eye that told me that she was really more looking for a loophole to exploit. Like, oh, I saw this really cute thing and I wanted to get it for you, but I bought it for myself. And then I just decided to give it to you. And the answer there was no. It's a no. Mostly because it was really truly bought with the intention of being for me and new, and I can't accept that. So if it was a true hand-me-down, something that maybe had been in her wardrobe for a period of months or years, something that she had legitimately worn, but maybe was no longer enchanted with and thought, I need to clean out my stuff, and I think this would be really cute on Lorelei, then I could potentially accept it, right? Most probably, because it was purchased with her in mind and got used by her, and it would just go to a landfill or a charity shop if she didn't give it to me. So there's that. So as I've communicated with the spirit of the Ohio River, which I understand sounds like a crazy ass thing to say, but sometimes in witchcraft we say crazy ass things. As I've communicated with the spirit, I've come to understand that this request is coming from a place of need on her behalf. She talks to me in a feminine sounding voice, so I use she, her pronouns for the river. The world's biggest water polluter currently is the fashion industry. It has shifted from being manufacturing of other types of goods to really the manufacture of clothing is the thing that's really, really polluting the rivers. They don't yet have the same restrictions on them, or there's more information there. That's a whole other topic. I'll put some links down below for you to understand a little bit more what's going on there if you're interested in learning more about that. But fast fashion is a blight, basically, on our planet. It's terrible for the environment. It's terrible for our budgets. We think that because we're buying cheap clothes, that's good for our budget. But if we're having to buy and replace those cheap clothes every single season because they just don't hold up, that's not actually good for your budget. You would have been better off buying one shirt that lasted you all year rather than a new shirt every 3 or 4 months. So again, I'm going to pop some links down in the good old goodie box down below in the description box if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that and looking into how you can make an impact on that. And I'm also going to put a link down there for the Ohio River Foundation. That's a charitable organization that's committed to protecting this powerful, important, and frankly beautiful river. The river is like right out here from me right now. So I'm not at my house, and it's usually like right out my window at my house too when I'm filming. But I'm staying at a hotel that's on the river, and so I'll include a little snip of like what it looks like out the window right now. She's the source of drinking water. The Ohio River is the source of drinking water for about 5 million people, and she's a warm water habitat for a host of aquatic life, and is also a major U.S. transportation corridor. So I think most of us tend to think of just the highways, and maybe airspace as being how goods are getting transported, but river barges are still very much a thing. And those of us that live on major rivers that are navigable, we know because we see the barges coming up and down. So in this area, there's a lot of coal and a lot of gravel from the limestone that gets transported up and down the Ohio River. So she's vital, right? She's vital to the livelihoods and the sort of life-sustaining forces that the people in this area rely on. And more than 25 million people live in the Ohio River Basin. So that's 25 million people who are sustained by her waters in a countless number of ways. The animals here are sustained, the trees and the plants are sustained by her as the river, and then her tributaries and streams and, that watershed. So yeah, I accepted the gesh that she offered me. I love this river. I've looked upon her waters and spoken to her every single day since I moved to my little spot on her southern bank in 2022, and became truly a Lorelei on the riverbank, sometimes singing and combing my hair while looking at the river. I accepted it. I accepted the gesh because I love and respect her. And when someone asks for help, it's in my core nature to do what I can to help them. If I'm able to, I do what I can. So it sounds like this is a hardship that I'm living under when I talk to other folks about it. There are a lot of people that act like that this is just a really, really difficult thing that I'm doing, and that I'm really sacrificing a lot. And from one perspective, I can see how that could appear that way. But I don't think it really is. It isn't in reality for me that much of a hardship. I'm not really doing without anything, right? So I can still add new pieces to my wardrobe. They just can't be new. They have to be new to me. And I have to make some choices with care and mindfulness and thoughtfulness around that. But it's that I don't really think of as a sacrifice necessarily. It's just a mindfulness and an awareness. I can still even do things like cosplay and do history bounding, both of which have been long-term interests and hobbies of mine. One of the reasons that I got into sewing, well, not the reason that I got into sewing, I started sewing when I was about 11 years old, and it was so that I could make specific shorts and pants and shirts and things that I wanted for myself that I couldn't. It was cheaper to sew than it was to go and buy brand new things. And I could have exactly what I wanted. I could make things that were comfortable to me. And I didn't know then that I have sensory issues because of autism, but I do, and I did. And so I was like, there's a style that I like, and I'm going to wear 15 things that are exactly that piece of clothing, just with different fabric, or different patterns on the fabric kind of thing. So I can still do all of that. I just have to be more conscientious and careful about how I source the textiles that I use. And for me, I feel like that just adds a layer of magic and power and potency to every piece of clothing, because there's more of a story embedded in it, and there's more thought that I had to give to it just to use it. A question that of like friends that I have, the few friends that I've already shared with this about, that they often ask is there a blessing or a potential curse, some kind of hex that's embedded into this gesh for me? So that's a conversation that I've also had with the river. I asked that question before I said yes, and was told that there is no punishment per se. If I make a mistake, if I fail at it, if I didn't understand something as being what it was when it was given to me and accepted it, in stories, that would always be that another character was trying to trick you into accepting new clothes, I sound like I'm a brownie. You can't give me new clothes or else I will no longer be in service. um, I was told that, yeah, there's not anything specific that would happen negatively to me if I have made this mistake. I think the negative that I would experience is that I would feel guilty and self-conscious and sort of hold myself even more accountable in the future, right? But then the other side to that is there a blessing that's specific? And I did not ask that question because that's not why I was motivated to say yes in the first place. So I didn't specifically ask, what do I get out of this? Which I think is a valid question to ask. If you're going into any kind of deal or compact, you probably want to know what you're getting out of it. But for me, I feel like what I'm getting out of it is feeling like I'm making a difference, feeling like I'm doing something positive, even if it is just one small drop in the ocean. Chemically, one drop can change the nature of the water around it to be more like itself. So one small drop in the ocean is not a small thing. I also don't think, and I'm just going to be really honest here, if there was a blessing that I had been told was going to be associated with it, it is not something that I would probably share. Not just in this environment where I'd be like sharing with the general public, but I probably wouldn't share that with anybody just because that seems like a thing to keep more to yourself. I think sharing of that would sort of invite the evil eye and that sort of envy, right? That has its own negatives to it. So I prefer to avoid that when and if I can, if it's within my power. Envy is a green-eyed monster, right? Or a blue-eyed one, depending on your cultural context. It's a moot point for me anyway, though. Like I said, I didn't accept the gesh because I thought it would give me a power-up of some kind or confer protection. I accepted it because it was a favor that was specifically requested of me by an entity that I cherish. And this favor was in alignment with my core values. I've been a thrifter since I was in college in the 90s, and I've been a capsule wardrober for years. I have enjoyed sort of working with a smaller wardrobe and making pieces mix and match and that type of thing. You may have already noticed, in fact, that there's really kind of a small rotation of clothes that I often wear when I'm filming for the channel. And it's not that I have like my YouTube outfits, or if I'm talking about this topic, then I'm going to wear that shirt kind of thing. I know a lot of YouTubers that do that as sort of like a visual thing. And I like it. I think it's a good idea, but that's not why I do it. It's just, I don't honestly have that many clothes on purpose, and I haven't for a long time. So if you've ever wondered about that, if you're like, man, I've seen that same dress in like 15 episodes, now you know why. And as we come more to the conclusion of this particular video, I want to encourage you to talk in the comments about a couple of things, anything you want, always and obviously, but I'm curious about a few things that I would like to throw out there as topics of conversation. The first one is, do you have a gesh of your own that you're working under? Is this something that you were given? Maybe you didn't even realize that it had a name of a category of thing that it was. If you feel comfortable sharing about that, I'd be interested in hearing about it. And the other question, or the other kind of group of questions, is, have you made similar commitments around limiting your involvement in fast fashion? I know that there are some challenges, like internet social media challenges, like hashtag no new clothes usually means no new clothes for 1 year, which is it's a big thing. And I know that a lot of people do engage in that kind of thing. I learned that after all of this started with me. I didn't know that it was a thing until suddenly it was a thing. I know that there's also some movements that are out there to really sort of move toward thrifting and secondhand upcycling, repurposing clothing instead of buying this cheap and destructive stuff that is being just pumped into our environment. So yeah, are you into any of that? Have you already been doing that? As I have started sharing about that, that's something that I've heard from more people is, oh yeah, I took a challenge, and I'm just kind of sticking with it because I would rather have pieces that I feel like are unique to me, and I don't care about following the current fashion trends. I want to have pieces that express my personality and that I feel good about in lots of ways. And if you're not already participating in something like that, is this video inspiring you to? I would be curious about that, but you don't have to necessarily fluff my ego by telling me so. Yeah, and I think that's all I have to say about that. So if you found today's video useful, helpful, inspiring in any way, informative, let me know in the comments. Bless me with the magic of the like button. It does help feed the spirit of the algorithm so that good things continue to happen here at Blade and Broom. And definitely tell your witchy friends. Share with them about this as a resource if you find it to be a good one. I've left lots of goodies, lots of links down in the comment box, not in the comment box, in the description box for you. So check those out, and I will see you here next week. Bye, friends.